I can't make it any plainer than that. Treebeard may be right, or since he's not among the wise, capital W, he may be wrong. And I could say Tolkien's distinction between made and create is, I don't know, quite the semantic argument, but philologist, so yeah, that makes sense. So where do we land on this? I land where Tolkien did. I think, hello everybody, welcome to Aude and Sulliva, where we are walking our way through Tolkien's Legendarium, looking for new insights and a greater understanding of the works we all love. Today we're finishing up the 4th chapter of Book 3, Treebeard. As we get started, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, grab a version of the books you don't have in the description below, or join the channel membership community if you'd like to support the channel that way. We also have a couple of great deals for you in the description. You can get 15% off artisanal tea and coffee from Chapters Tea and Coffee, and also get money off your closing costs when refinancing or purchasing a new home with Rocket Mortgage. Links again are in the description. All right, let's dive in. So we left Merry and Pippin dumbstruck at all the different types of Ents coming into Durndingle for the Entmoot. At first, Merry and Pippin were struck chiefly by the variety that they saw. Many shapes and colors, the difference in girth and height and length of leg and arm, and the number of toes and fingers, anything from 3 to 9. A few seemed more or less related to Treebeard and reminded them of beech trees or oaks. But there were other kinds. Some were called the chestnut, brown-skinned Ents with large, splay-fingered hands and short, thick legs. Some were called the ash, tall, straight, gray. Ents with many fingered hands and long legs, some the fir, the tallest Ents, and others the birch, the rowan, and the linden. But when the Ents all gathered round Treebeard, bowing their heads slightly, murmuring in their slow musical voices, and looking long and intently at the strangers, then the hobbits saw that they were all of the same kindred, and all had the same eyes. Not all so old or so deep as Treebeard's, but all with the same slow, steady, thoughtful expression and the same green flicker. Now, I love these descriptions. I do wish I knew more about the different types of trees just in general, so I could picture the different Ents in my mind better, but that's a whole different type of learning that I'm honestly kind of bad at. Something I did notice is how this entire paragraph is talking about the differences between how all the different Ents look. When you look at the prologue that talks about the hobbits, all we get are a couple generalities about what all hobbits look like. There's a whole paragraph about their height. The next paragraph is half about how they like to dress, and with it finally telling us that hobbits are, as a rule, good-natured rather than beautiful, broad, bright-eyed, red-cheeked, with mouths apt to laughter and to eating and drinking. And that is supposed to be for all hobbits. But Tolkien spends this whole section just telling us how different all of these Ents are. I don't have a lot more to say other than it's just super fascinating. The different peoples of Middle-earth are like so similar to each other. Easy enough to see a few different elves and really get an idea what they all look like. You know, if you've seen one, you've kind of seen them all. But with Ents, if you've seen one, you've seen one. It's just such an amazing addition to the universe, especially considering Tolkien was basically making up for like the part in Macbeth when the forest was alive marching, but it was just some dudes with branches stuck to them. Now, once all the Ents arrive, they get right down to business and chant at each other. Pippin, being Pippin, lets his mind wander and eventually gets a little bored. The Ents began to murmur slowly. First one joined and then another, until they were all chanting together in a long, rising and falling rhythm, now louder on one side of the ring, now dying away there and rising to a great boom on the other side. Though he could not catch or understand any of the words, he supposed the language was Entish, Pippin found the sound very pleasant to listen to at first, but gradually his attention wavered. After a long time, and the chant showed no signs of slackening, he found himself wondering, since Entish was such an unhasty language, whether they had yet got further than good morning. And if Treebeard was to call the roll, how many days it would take to sing all their names. I wonder what the Entish is for yes or no, he thought. He yawned. So we don't exactly know how long Pippin was sitting there on Treebeard's shoulder, listening to the Ents talk in a language he can't understand. But it says a long time. I've had the experience a couple times of attending a church service in a different language, and I will tell you, it is really hard to pay attention. And it's almost exactly like what Pippin shows here. At first, it's interesting. You notice the rhythm of the language, maybe catch a word or two that you learned earlier. You hear how people respond or answer questions or how much back and forth there is, just kind of the different type of liturgy. But eventually you realize you have no idea what's really going on. The one word in 100 you can understand doesn't really give you any context of what they're talking about. Then your mind starts to wander. Exactly what happens to Pippin, and he realizes it doesn't sound like they're going to stop soon or even whether they've finished saying hello. He feels tired, and I love this sentence here. He yawned. Tolkien uses super short sentences like that to really cool effect throughout the Legendarium. Perhaps the greatest example is when Fingolfin calls Morgoth out in challenge, and it simply says, "And Morgoth came." It's an insanely powerful way to bring just nuts gravitas and impute so much meaning so efficiently. Though I won't say Pippin yawning deserves a whole lot of gravitas, the short statement does carry a lot of meaning behind it, and at least for me, really makes me like feel how Pippin, like how he's feeling right now. Of course, he probably didn't try to hide that yawn behind a hand or anything. It was probably loud and really obnoxious, knowing Pippin. Of course, Treebeard notices. Treebeard was immediately aware of him. Hey, my Pippin, he said, and the other Ents all stopped their chant. You are a hasty folk, I was forgetting, and anyway, it is wearisome listening to a speech you do not understand. You may get down now. I have told your names to the Entmoot, and they have seen you, and they have agreed that you are not orcs, and that a new line shall be put in the old lists. We have got no further yet, but that is quick work for an Entmoot. You and Mary can stroll about in the dingle if you like. There is a well of good water if you need refreshing away yonder in the north bank. There are still some words to speak before the moot really begins. I will come and see you again and tell you how things are going. So after a few hours, the Ents have decided they're not orcs. This is the epitome of this meeting could have been an email. But of course, Treebeard is in a hurry to get at Saruman, so they also added the hobbits to the old list of creatures, so they're basically sprinting. Probably the most interesting thing about this chapter is the parataxis used. I have told your names to the Entmoot, and they have seen you, and they have agreed that you are not orcs, and that a new line shall be put in the old lists. Now, I may get this a little bit wrong, or at least not entirely correct, one of the two, but parataxis is the use of generally shorter sentences, each their own thought, where they don't necessarily need the sentence before them to make sense, or in this case, connecting them using the conjunction and. I know it's happened a time or two earlier in the books, but I didn't catch it then. So if you want to let me know in the description, or not in the description, in the comments, what other times you've seen this happen before here, cool, I would love that. That would be awesome. Now, I don't fully understand the usage of parataxis, but when I'm reading a passage like this, I almost feel breathless. I saw one description as parataxis is almost like how a child speaks, and having a 2-year-old, I really feel that. Short sentences, your brain running to catch up. It almost makes you feel breathless. And even though this is Treebeard talking, I get the same feeling. It's like Tolkien was trying to get us to feel how quickly the Ents really were moving. While it may not have felt like quick work to the hobbits, I'm sure it made the Ents almost feel winded for their pace. And Treebeard is trying to get that across to the readers here, or Tolkien through you know what I mean. And as Treebeard realizes it's tough to listen to a language they don't understand, he lets the hobbits down, lets them stroll around in another part of the dingle with a well for some water. So even though they're probably a little hungry, at least they won't be wanting for water. Now, as the hobbits head over to their little resting spot, they start discussing their plight again. Pippin brings up a good point about really the entire situation. What is Isengard like, said Pippin. I wonder what Ents can do about it anyway. So do I, said Mary. Isengard is a sort of ring of rocks or hills, I think, with a flat space inside and an island or pillar of rock in the middle called Orthanc. Saruman has a tower on it. There is a gate, perhaps more than one, in the encircling wall, and I believe there's a stream running through it. It comes out the mountains and flows on across the Gap of Rohan. It does not seem the sort of place for Ents to tackle. But I have an odd feeling about these Ents. Somehow I don't think they are quite as safe and, well, funny as they seem. They seem slow, queer, and patient, almost sad. And yet I believe they could be roused. If that happened, I would rather not be on the other side. Here we get our first idea of what Isengard looks like. We heard about it from Gandalf in the Council of Elrond a little bit, but not quite this much. It seems Merry spent his time in Rivendell better than Pippin did, though he doesn't quite know it all, obviously. He mentioned Saruman has a tower on top of a pillar of rock. Now, feel free again to correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure the pillar of rock is the tower, but obviously they're going to get a closer look soon enough. But when thinking about what the Ents could do against such a stronghold, Merry makes a really interesting point. First, he said it doesn't seem like a place the Ents could take on, but quickly shifts gears to saying, but they might be able to. And the way he says it reminds me of The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe by C.S. Lewis. I believe it's Mr. Beaver who says it when asked if Aslan is safe. Of course he isn't safe, but he's good. That's the kind of vibe I'm picking up on. Treebeard and the Ents are good. They're chill, they do their thing, they're kind to any and all, but they're not safe. If you truly get on their bad side and get them roused, it will be a dangerous thing to be around, which Saruman will learn. After a time hanging out and drinking some spring water from an actual spring, not a bottle, there is a pause in the Ent voices and Treebeard comes by. Here I am again, said Treebeard. Are you getting weary or feeling impatient? Well, I am afraid that you must not get impatient yet. We have finished the first stage now, but I have still got to explain things again to those that live a long way off, far from Isengard, and those that I could not get round to before the moot. And after that we shall have to decide what to do. However, deciding what to do does not take end so long as going over all the facts and events that they have to make up their minds about. Still, it's no use denying we shall be here a long time yet, a couple of days very likely. So I have brought you a companion. He has an end house nearby. Bregalad is his elvish name. He says he has already made up his mind and does not need to remain at the moot. He is the nearest thing among us to a hasty end. You ought to get on together. Goodbye. Treebeard turned and left them. So despite all their hope, Treebeard says it will still take quite a while, even up to a few more days, for the Ents to make up their minds about what to do. But we get a little more information about what Treebeard was doing early in the morning while the hobbits were sleeping in. We know he was traveling around to let other Ents know about the moot, but here he tells us kind of what some of those conversations were about. He was doing some legwork, as it were. He was explaining the situation, giving them information, and giving them some time to think about it before they really had to start discussing it. Now, this 9,000 IQ move on his part, it really seems like he was planning this for a while and just didn't have the kick in the pants that he needed to really get it started. Better than anyone, he knew it would take a lot of time for the Ents to make up their minds, so he was priming the pump. He still has to explain to the others that live really far away, but now he'll have more Ents on his side, nodding along and making affirmative sounds. He was politicking like a pro. But he also brought the hobbits a friend to chat with while they wait for the others to decide. My friends, let us go for a walk, he said. I am Bregalad, that is Quickbeam in your language, but it is only a nickname, of course. They have called me that ever since I said yes to an elder Ent before he had finished his question. Also, I drink quickly and go out while some are still wetting their beards. Come with me. Treebeard brought them a hasty Ent to be their companion. And in his defense, the Ent asking the question was probably asking a question Quickbeam had already thought about and was taking well over an hour to ask it. Better to save everyone some time and just say yes. Quickbeam takes the hobbits to his own Ent house. The hobbits find him to be a lovely companion. He smiles, laughs at anything and everything good. Sunshine, streams, whisper in the trees. And we learn he especially loves rowan trees, as he had them in his Ent house. That is until the orcs came and cut them down. It seems like he was thinking about doing something to the orcs long before Treebeard called the Ents together in the moot. And because of his love and loss of great rowan trees, we get a poem. O orofane lasamista canimirie, O rowan fair, upon your hair now white the blossom lay. O rowan mine, I saw you shine upon a summer's day. Your rind so bright, your leaves so light, your voice so cool and soft. Upon your head how golden red the crown you bore aloft. O rowan dead, upon your head your hair is dry and gray. Your crown is spilled, your voice is stilled forever and a day. He repeats the first line at the end, but I've learned it's best to leave part of a complete work out of a video. Better safe than sorry. So here we have another poem you can hear Tolkien himself read if you check out this quick video right here. The poem is, again, in iambic heptameter, and what I'm realizing about these poems is that while many of them are iambic heptameter, what Corey Olsen calls hobbit meter, the ones actually sung by hobbits tend to stick to the meter a lot more closely. Some will have 4 feet, but have a couple of syllables in between the stressed syllables. And technically, iambic heptameter is 1 unstressed syllable and 1 stressed syllable. So it's not a perfect heptameter. This one is anyway, but it still kind of reads that way. Now, going out on a limb, I think Tolkien does that on purpose to kind of idealize the hobbits a little bit. Since he most identifies as a hobbit, I think it pretty fitting. He wants to have the most regular rhythm with them. It's the most regular rhythm, but it's also the least complex, at least from what this noob can figure out. So the hobbits hang out with Quickbeam for an entire day, and then the third day comes. The morning is uneventful until the afternoon came, and the sun, going west towards the mountains, sent out long yellow beams between the cracks and fissures of the clouds. Suddenly, they were aware that everything was very quiet. The whole forest stood in listening silence. Of course, the Ent voices had stopped. But what did that mean? Bregalad was standing up erect and tense, looking back northwards towards Durndingle. Now, this is such a powerful moment. Tolkien builds the tension so well here. It reminds me of when the company was in Holland and Aragorn brought up how everything was quiet. They all immediately just got tense, you could tell. But it's different here. Here, somehow, Tolkien makes us feel expectant. He gives the Forest an active part in the whole thing too. The Forest stood listening in listening silence. The Forest itself was waiting for something. Ent voices stopped, and the description of Bregalad ratchets up the tension too. Not only is he erect and tense, which is pretty obvious here, I can see him almost, like leaning forward a little bit, just waiting. Then with a crash came a great ringing shout, Rahum Ra! The trees quivered and bent as if a gust had struck them. There was another pause, and then a marching music began like solemn drums, and above the rolling beats and booms there welled voices singing high and strong. We come with roll of drum, tarun darun darun daram. The Ents were coming, ever nearer, and louder rose their song. We come with horn and drum, tarun narun narun naram. Bregalad picked up the hobbits and strode from his house. The renewed voices of the Ents is so powerful. The trees bend before them like a hurricane. I can almost see Bregalad being in such a hurry to join the other Ents. He just picks up the hobbits so quickly, and they have to get really tight so they don't get whiplash. As they leave his house, they see the result of the mood. Before long, they saw the marching line approaching. The Ents were swinging along with great strides down the slope towards them. Treebeard was at their head, and some 50 followers were behind him, two abreast, keeping step with their feet and beating time with their hands upon their flanks. As they drew near, the flash and flicker of their eyes could be seen. Hoom hum, here we come with a boom, here we come at last, called Treebeard when he caught sight of Bregalad and the hobbits. Come, join the moot, we are off to Isengard. To Isengard, the Ents cried in many voices. And here we get Song of the Ents. Please pause this video, take a second, click this one up here. The professor himself gets me teary-eyed and all goosebumpy when he reads this. The Ents have been roused, and I can only imagine the awe the hobbits felt at that moment, especially after only seeing a placid, calm Treebeard and a fun, laughing Bregalad. This change must be terrifying, and they seem to make up their minds rather quickly. Treebeard admits it was quicker than expected, but we get a very good explanation as to why they moved so quickly. It is the orc work, the wanton hewing Raum, without even the bad excuse of feeding the fires, that has so angered us, and the treachery of a neighbor who should have helped us. Wizards ought to know better. They do know better. There is no curse in Elvish, Entish, or the tongues of men bad enough for such treachery. Down with Saruman! Treachery of purpose. He says a wizard should and does know better. Saruman went against his purpose. He worked with orcs. He destroyed those things he was there to protect. But we know Isengard is a big ring of stone and a tall tower of stone in the middle. Merry is right there with us in this thinking. Will you really break the doors of Isengard? Asked Merry. Oh, well, we could, you know. You do not know, perhaps, how strong we are. Maybe you have heard of trolls? They are mighty strong, but trolls are only counterfeits, made by the enemy in the great darkness, in mockery of Ents, as orcs were of elves. We are stronger than trolls. We are made of the bones of the earth. We can split stone like the roots of trees, only quicker, far quicker, if our minds are roused. If we are not hewn down or destroyed by fire or blast of sorcery, we could split Isengard into splinters and crack its walls into rubble. Now, there is a bit less about trolls and their origins in the Legendarium than there are of orcs. Treebeard here does give us a little insight, which is pretty similar to what the Silmarillion says about orcs. They were made in mockery of another creature, in this case for trolls, the Ents, which is why trolls are so big and strong. Appendix F tells us a little bit. They were dull and lumpish creatures, and even that Sauron seemed to breed some trolls to serve his purposes. And while Tolkien truly wrestled with the origin of the orcs, he didn't seem to go that deeply with the trolls. But if at this point in, I guess, the writing of the story, like we talked about regarding the orcs, Morgoth couldn't create, only twist and corrupt, how could Treebeard say they were made? So in letter 153, a draft to Peter Hastings, Tolkien said, Treebeard does not say that the Dark Lord created trolls and orcs. He says he made them in a counterfeit of certain creatures pre-existing. There is, to me, a wider gulf between the two statements, so wide that Treebeard's statement could, in my world, have possibly been true. I'm not sure about trolls. I think they are mere counterfeits, and hence, though here I am of course only using elements of old barbarous myth-making, that had no aware metaphysics, they returned to mere stone images when not in the dark. But there are other sorts of trolls besides these rather ridiculous, if brutal, stone trolls, for which other origins are suggested. I can't make it any plainer than that. Treebeard may be right, or since he's not among the wise, capital W, he may be wrong. And I could say Tolkien's distinction between made and create is, I don't know, quite the semantic argument, but philologist, so yeah, that makes sense. So where do we land on this? I land where Tolkien did. I think they were possibly corrupted beings, grown with dark powers to be big and strong. Am I 100% correct? Probably not. But Tolkien did like himself some mystery, just taking some things at face value and kind of moving on. So I guess we'll have to on occasion as well. As the Ents continue their march towards Isengard, Pippin and Treebeard's eyes meet. Pippin sees the flame from Treebeard's eyes no longer at the forefront, but kind of behind his thoughts. "Of course, it is likely enough, my friends," he said slowly. "Likely enough that we are going to our doom. The last march of the Ents. But if we stayed at home and did nothing, doom would find us anyway sooner or later. That thought has long been growing in our hearts, and that is why we are marching now." It was not a hasty resolve. Now at least the last march of the Ents may be worth a song. "Aye," he sighed. "We may help the other peoples before we pass away. Still, I should have liked to see the songs come true about the Entwives. I should dearly have liked to see Fimbrethil again. But there, my friends, songs like trees bear fruit only in their own time and their own way, and sometimes they are withered untimely." So Treebeard knows they may be marching to their deaths, but he knows they must do whatever they can to help all the free peoples of Middle-earth regardless. Perhaps one of the things that was holding them back was deep in the back of their minds. Going up against a wizard was dangerous work, and even though he may have missed the chance to see his old love, Fimbrethil, again, he knows what they go to do is worthwhile. They're doing what needs to be done, no matter what. And this next passage will be the last reading for the video, but I won't expound on it afterwards, so I want to kind of lead into it a little bit. We will hear Pippin describe his first sight of Huorns, but without the name tied to them. Tolkien will leave us with tension and mystery and go back in time to the three hunters in the next chapter. Interlacing at its finest, the best way to hook people in. Now, the Ents have arrived at Isengard. Pippin looked behind. The number of the Ents had grown. Or what was happening? Where the dim bare slopes that they had crossed should lie, he thought he saw groves of trees, but they were moving. Could it be that the trees of Fangorn were awake, and the forest was rising, marching over the hills to war? He rubbed his eyes, wondering if sleep and shadow had deceived him. But the great gray shapes moved steadily onward. There was a noise like wind in many branches. The Ents were drawing near the crest of the ridge now, and all song had ceased. Night fell, and there was silence. Nothing was to be heard save a faint quiver of the earth beneath the feet of the Ents, and a rustle, the shade of a whisper, as of many drifting leaves. At last they stood upon the summit and looked down into a dark pit. The great cleft at the end of the mountains, Nan Curinir, the valley of Saruman. Night lies over Isengard, said Treebeard. And that is where we'll end for today. Thank you all so much for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe. Buy a new version of the book you don't already have in the description. Join the channel membership. Don't forget, claim your 15% off Chapters Tea and Coffee, or your money off on a rocket mortgage. And until next time, always remember, out in Tulva, they shall come again.